Okay, so I need to tell you about Uma, my neighbor who's been involved in the most unbelievable series of incidents over the past year. I mean, this girl is like the human equivalent of a soap opera, always drama, always excitement. So, there's Uma, she lives next door to me and Sawyer, my best friend since childhood. We're talking the kind of friendship that's been tested by late-night pizza runs, video game marathons, and our fair share of bad decisions. Anyway, Uma joined our little circle about a year ago, and at first, it was like she dropped out of a Jane Austen novel, proper manners, etiquette, the whole 9 yards. But, as time went on, you started to notice that there was more to this girl than meets the eye. She's got this mysterious air about her, like she's hiding secrets behind those piercing green eyes. Sawyer and I would often talk about it, speculating what could be going on behind closed doors, no pun intended. Which what? Did she used to be a spy or something? One day, Uma invited us over for dinner at her place, claiming that her chef had left for the day and she needed our help. Sounds innocent enough, but as soon as we stepped foot into her apartment, you could tell something was off. The air was thick with tension, like there was an unspoken rule that no one dared to break. I swear, it was like walking onto a scene from a spy thriller. So, we're sitting down to dinner, trying our best to make small talk while the kitchen staff was frantically preparing something in the background. That's when Kieran walked in, Uma's ex-boyfriend, or so she claimed. The way they looked at each other was like a slow-motion car crash, you didn't want to look but couldn't help yourself. And I know what you're thinking, it's just an old breakup, how big of a deal can that be? But trust me, this was more than that. This was drama on steroids, and I'm not even kidding when I say that I felt like I was witnessing a war unfold before my eyes. Sawyer and I exchanged this look, like, what is going on here? And Uma just smiled sweetly, like the cat who ate the canary. But that's where our story takes an abrupt turn, because just as things were about to get interesting, Kieran announced that he was moving back into the neighborhood, and not just that, but he had a proposition for Uma. I kid you not, it sounded like something out of a bad rom-com, and before we could even process what was happening, Kieran dropped another bombshell, one that would change everything in its wake. Which I'm still trying to wrap my head around, to be honest. As I sit here, reliving the events of the past year, I can barely believe what's unfolding. So, without further ado, let me continue where we left off. It turns out that Kieran's proposition for Uma was to take over his old business venture, a high-stakes art gallery that had been the talk of the town just months ago. But here's the catch, Uma was not only moving into the gallery, but also inheriting its entire debt and financial woes. And if that wasn't enough, Kieran dropped a bombshell that left me speechless. He revealed that he and Uma had a past connection, one that went all the way back to their college days. It seemed that they had been romantically involved for a brief period, but things had ended abruptly due to some, let's call them, creative differences. But what really shook us was when Kieran revealed that Uma had unknowingly become pregnant with his child. Yes, you read that right. Pregnant. With his child. And not only that, but the father of this child was none other than a wealthy tech mogul named Marcus Thompson, who just so happened to be one of Kieran's business associates. It turned out that Uma had been in a brief relationship with Marcus a few years ago, and they had kept it on the down low due to his high-profile status. But here's where things get really complicated. Marcus had recently become interested in purchasing the gallery from Kieran, but only if he could make Uma's involvement a part of the deal. And as we watched this drama unfold before our eyes, it was clear that no one was going to come out unscathed. The stakes were high, and the tension was palpable. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more surreal, Marcus himself appeared on the scene, his piercing gaze cutting through the air like a hot knife through butter. He was charming, of course, who wouldn't be? But there was something unsettling about him that made me wonder if he was playing us all for fools. As we watched the drama unfold, Sawyer and I exchanged a look that spoke volumes. We were both thinking the same thing, what have we gotten ourselves into? But Uma just smiled sweetly, like she knew a secret that none of us did. And then, just as things were about to get even more interesting, the doorbell rang, breaking the spell of unease that had settled over us. It was Kieran, looking frazzled and worried, his eyes darting nervously around the room. What's going on? Uma asked, rising from her seat to answer the door. You look like you've lost your last marble. It's Marcus, Kieran replied, his voice barely above a whisper. He just showed up at my house with some kind of package. He wouldn't tell me what it was, but he said I had to meet him here immediately. Sawyer and I exchanged another look, this one filled with a growing sense of unease. We knew that when Marcus was involved, things could escalate quickly. Show us, Uma said finally, her voice firm but cautious. Kieran hesitated for a moment before stepping aside to reveal the contents of the package. And what we saw took our collective breath away. Inside a small, unmarked box lay a photograph. It was an image of Sawyer, his eyes wide with shock and fear as he stared straight into the camera. But it wasn't just that, it was who was standing behind him. Uma's own brother, the one she had been so devoted to in her younger years, stood in the background, his face twisted into a snarl. No, Uma whispered, her eyes fixed on the photograph as if she were mesmerized by some sort of dark magic. This can't be. Sawyer and I felt like we'd been punched in the gut, our minds reeling with questions. Who was behind this? What did Marcus want from us? As we stood there, frozen in shock, Uma's eyes flashed with a fierce determination. She knew that she had to do something, but what, exactly, she didn't know yet. And then, just as we were starting to piece together the fragments of this twisted puzzle, I heard a faint noise coming from the hallway. It sounded like footsteps, heavy and deliberate, growing louder by the second. "I think we have company," Sawyer whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding in my chest. Uma's eyes locked onto mine, her gaze burning with an unspoken question, "What now?" We turned to face the hallway, our hearts racing with anticipation. The footsteps stopped right outside our door, and for a moment, there was complete silence. Then, without warning, the door creaked open and Kieran stepped inside. He looked like he'd been through hell, his eyes sunken and his skin pale. But it was what he was carrying that really caught my attention, a large, unmarked envelope clutched in his hand. "Where have you been?" Uma demanded, her voice firm but laced with concern. Kieran didn't respond, instead, he simply handed the envelope to Sawyer, who looked at it like it might be a bomb. After what felt like an eternity, Sawyer ripped open the flap and pulled out a photograph. It was another picture of Marcus, but this time, he was standing in front of a familiar building, our old family home. "It's been sold," Kieran announced, his voice barely above a whisper. "Someone bought it from us, without even asking." The implications hit us like a ton of bricks. If someone had bought our home and didn't even ask permission, then that meant they must have been involved in Marcus's disappearance. As we stood there, trying to wrap our minds around this new information, I heard Kieran take a deep breath. "I think it's time we knew the truth," he said, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for something, or someone. "Who is it?" Uma asked, her voice laced with a mix of curiosity and fear. Kieran hesitated before answering, his words spilling out in a rush. "It's me," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'm the one who sold our home." We were all stunned into silence. Sawyer looked like he'd been punched again, while Uma's eyes were fixed on Kieran as if searching for any sign of deception. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Kieran took another deep breath before answering. "I did it to protect you," he said, his eyes welling up with tears. "Marcus was in deep trouble, and I knew that if anyone was going to take care of him, it would be you too." The room seemed to spin around us as we tried to process this revelation. I felt like our whole world had been turned upside down. As the reality of Kieran's words sunk in, I couldn't help but think back to all the strange occurrences that had plagued us over the past year. It was all starting to make sense now, the mysterious phone calls, the suspicious noises at night, the feeling of being watched. Uma was the first to speak up, her voice filled with a mix of anger and sadness. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, her eyes blazing with hurt. Kieran shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "I was scared," he admitted. "Scared that if I told you, you'd try to stop me. But it was too late now. We knew the truth, and nothing would ever be the same again." As we stood there, frozen in shock, Kieran's words hung in the air like a challenge. Who was behind Marcus's disappearance? And what did they want from us? The answer, I realized, was finally within our grasp. But would it be enough to bring closure to this twisted saga, or would it only lead to more questions and answers? I still can't believe this happened.